Hey guys, welcome back to Quick Notes with Chris. Today we're going to be talking about the book Mastery by Robert Greene. It's a really interesting concept. It talks about how pretty much the key to wealth, or the easiest way to become successful, is through mastery, becoming a master at something. So mastery is when your skill becomes second nature. You no longer need to have to think about it. It's literally automated. It's created such a solid foundation that he talks about. It's also your intuition becomes better than logic. It means that no matter how many signs indicate from any other person that it's not the right thing to do, your intuition, your experience is always going to trump that and be a better thing to rely on. It's really quite interesting. It talks about how you can have a lot of people have the misconception that you have to be highly intelligent in order to become good at chess. When the reality is, it's just like any other skill. The person who puts in the most amount of hours is the person who's going to be the best. Magnus Carlsen, who's currently the #1 player in the world, arguably, there's a lot of evidence supporting it. There's an interview that I watched recently that I thought was so interesting. So he was being interviewed by a person, and while he was sitting there talking, he looked distracted. He looked as if he wasn't even present in the interview. When the interviewer asked, "What is it that you're thinking about it?" he said, I was just looking at a chess game that I was thinking about, a few months ago." He was obsessive. He was constantly thinking about chess. There was nothing else that was on his mind, and that's a level of mastery. Robert talks about saying that the average level of mastery to achieve mastery level is about 20,000 hours. 20,000 hours of any given skill, and eventually you'll reach that master level. So, he talks about how it is that you become a master. Well, the easiest way to become a master is through finding a mentor, plugging in to someone who knows exactly what it is that you're trying to teach. For a multitude of benefits. For number one, you get to learn through someone else's mistakes rather than your own, which basically means that you get to fast track everything. But that doesn't mean that you don't have to go through a level of the boot camp. So he talks about basically you can be better equipped through someone else's learning process, especially if they care about it just as much as you do, which allows you to basically fast track your mastery process. And in your 20,000 hours, it becomes basically even more solid. Now, you may not be, it's more so about fast tracking the initial stages. He talks about how at some point it's just going to become an automated response where you just have to go through the boot camp. But let's say the initial 1,000 hours, you can fast track that to get to a certain level in your first 500 through plugging into a mentor. And that's just about anything. A lot of people view mastery as, skills, direct things that you go into. But something as simple as communication, something as simple as, public speaking, something as simple as relationships, that in itself is mastery too. So many people like to put labels on their mastery, but the truth is that at some point, everyone is going to become a master. And this is an interesting thing that he talks about. He says, no matter what, every single person is going to have a mastery. It's just the fact is that a lot of people don't get to choose what it is. Have you ever met those people who worked in the same job for 50 years, and then become absolute experts at it? But the thing is, they never actually decided chose that to become their mastery. It happened by default because that was where they were spending their time. So he talks about being cautious about what it is that you're putting your time into, because by default, you're going to become good at it. He also says a little bit of a decipher is that the average person has a limited amount of skills that they can learn. You can't become a master at absolutely everything. You have a limited focus, you have a limited capacity in order to learn an amount of things. So that then means choose wisely where you put your time. If you have 24 hours in a day, where are those hours being spent? Because at the end of your lifetime, there's only going to be a certain amount of things that you can learn, and specifically a certain amount of things that you can become a master at. He goes on to talk about a little bit of successful people, and if you look at for example, LeBron James, I already mentioned Magnus Carlsen, or even Bill Gates. They were putting in the boot camp. There was one thing that they were focusing on when they become a master. LeBron James is the best basketball player in the world because that is his #1 priority. In fact, nothing would even come close to the amount of hours that he puts into basketball. When Bill Gates was when Bill Gates was coding as a young person, he was averaging about 8 hours a day into coding. 8 hours of his day, 7 days a week, was put into coding, and that's part of the reason why he was able to become so successful with Microsoft. Magnus Carlsen, this plugs more into mentorship. He was mentored by the second best player of the 90s, I believe, of the 90s in chess, which allowed him to basically fast track his success. But all he did was focus on these obsessive parts in order to develop mastery. Now, he also talks about once you reach a certain level of mastery, you get an accelerated cycle of returns. A cycle of accelerated returns, which basically goes, he says it in his own way, but it's essentially the difference between delayed gratification and instant gratification. It's almost as if you've planted all these seeds, you've been cultivating, and now it's time to harvest, and you'll have all of these benefits. For a quote that I really like about is Cristiano Ronaldo. He says, on the day that he basically signed his first contract, where he was able to become a multi-millionaire, he said, "Today I became an overnight millionaire, but in truth, it took me 17 years and 180 days before I was able to become an overnight sensation." And what that talks about is basically he put in this work, he planted all of these seeds over an extended period of time, and then he was able to reap the benefits of everything that he harvested from that point, all of the seeds, all of the cultivation. And that's the same thing with mastery, especially if you click the right thing. If you want to make money, become a professional. If you want to make money, become a professional. You can make 7 figures in just about any industry nowadays, but you have to become a professional. Whether it's anything as slightly as mowing lawns to anything as extreme as becoming the best basketball player in the world, whether there's a large amount of people doing it or a little, if you become a professional, there's a large amount of money in it. So that means pick your masteries carefully. What is it that you want to go into? What is it that you're going to put your 20,000 hours into? Because no matter what, your time is being spent. But what is it that it's being spent on? The next thing that talks about is that once you start to reach the mastery level, of course you're going to have to continually grow, if you're not growing, you're dying. So he talks about mixture. And even though at some point, once you reach that mastery level, there's going to be set guidelines, set things that people know that works. But you end up starting to have a mixture. You end up implementing different things. For example, I always go back to LeBron James. LeBron James wasn't always a good three-point shooter. In fact, he was below average, right? But now, with the game changing and the basketball moving more towards a three-point shot, he's ended up creating a mixture in his game rather than just driving to the hoop. He's had to adapt and change, and he actually created a mixture. And now, he's a completely different player than he was 5-10 years ago. So once you have a level of mastery, it's all about not being stagnant, understanding that things do change. There will always be a better way to do things. And it talks about becoming humble, right? Humble means that you know that there's more to learn. The key to mastery is always understand there's always more to learn. You may not be the best, which means that there's always a better way to do stuff. You know, LeBron James averages like $2 million on his physical exercise because he understands there's still benefits that he can be made in his game. And that's the key to mastery. Always be hungry. Understand that there's more to learn. Understand that you never want to stagnate. Make a mixture. Try new things, especially once you reach that elite level. Next one is that. So, I guess basically to summarize, everyone becomes a master. Like, no matter what, you're going to become a master at something. So pick and choose carefully. Your time is going to be spent somewhere. Do you want it being spent at a job? Like, if you're working a job that you don't necessarily like, that is eventually, and you don't change, that will eventually become your mastery, right? Masters always have a mixture. They never stop learning. They understand that there's always going to be more to learn, better ways to do certain things. So make sure that you always have a level of humble. You always understand that there's more that you can learn. The next part is find a mentor. Fast track your early hours of your mastery, and you end up getting a better return on the hours that you're putting in. Finding a mentor, utilizing them, learn from someone else's mistakes rather than someone else, you're always going to get a better result. However, you're always going to have to put in the hours. There's a certain amount of hours, and its majority is probably 80%. 80% of the hours of the mastery you just have to put in. There are certain things that you have to learn through doing it yourself rather than someone else, right? Unless you're a robot and you can be programmed through code, you're going to have to put in your hours yourself. The next thing is that intuition eventually will become more reliable than the logic. You rely on the resolve of your basically previous level of experience of events in order to go off that versus what everyone else has talked about. The common thing, how can these highly intelligent people not get away with crimes? And the reason is because why the cop catches the criminal in certain cases is because of experience. Experience is something that is always going to be more valued than natural intelligence, natural talent, right? And an experienced criminal can get away from an experienced cop, but a highly intelligent person who's doing a crime for the first time will always be caught. And the reason is because experience. Experience is always going to be more valued than intelligence. The next one is 20,000 hours. So 20,000 hours is generally what it's going to take. And it's at that point that it becomes second nature. Anyways, guys, that's it for Quick Notes with Chris. We're still going to have a lot more videos coming up for improvement that you can put yourself in a better position for success. Today we covered Mastery. I highly suggest you keep reading. There's a few other books that I really want you to look out for. And Mastery, it's really interesting because it talks about goes well with the book One Thing, which is talks about focus and understanding that these successful people had one thing that they were focusing on in order to become successful. And it really goes really well hand in hand with Mastery, because I think Mastery sort of it takes us to that next level, because a lot of people have heard of the quote 10,000 hours, but Mastery uses 20,000 hours. So you can always look at other different books in order to basically expand your repertoire, expand your understanding, especially seeing as a lot of self-help books lean over into other areas and basically spill over, and you can combine the information that you have between all of them in order to become a better person yourself. Anyways, guys, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.